Last month I decided to sell my large TV, along with its TV stand on Craigslist. I got a new TV that's a little bigger and it's mounted on the wall. The old TV was in a large cabinet and I almost placed it in the dining room. My wife asked me to get rid of it, but I think I can make some money from it, so I put it on Craigslist in a few days. But I'm not interested. I was seriously considering a discount, because honestly, that's not a good deal. But then I got a little interested. A man contacted me and said he might be interested in buying it. He asked if he could see it. I only told him if he was serious, and he was right. I gave him my address, and we arranged for him to come see him at 7 p.m. the next night. I live in a medium-sized 2-story house, just me and my wife, because TV cabinets and televisions are quite bulky. I don't want to carry it around in the car to drive to the local car park. I thought it was no big deal that I gave him my address. The next night at 7 p.m., I waited for the guy to appear. After 30 minutes I texted him asking if he was still coming. He replied that yes, and he was on his way. I continued to wait. When he came to my house, it's 8 o'clock. It's dark outside. When I saw his car, I was disappointed. He arrived in a small 4-door sedan, and there's no way a TV or stand could fit in there. I watched the car drive slowly past our house. Then the car passed by and I briefly thought maybe it wasn't him, or maybe he was confused about the address. But then he parked the car almost out of my sight. I don't know why he parked so far away, but whatever. Then the guy came and I met him on the front porch. He was wearing a hooded sweatshirt and he looked about 20 years old. I invited him in and showed him the TV and the shelf, and they weren't too far from the door. I asked the guy if he wanted to buy it. The boy stood there and looked at him for a few seconds. He then said he wanted to buy it, but he wouldn't get the money until Friday and we would have to wait until then. I'm quite upset by this. I started walking the guy to the door so he could get out. I asked the guy, why did he come today if he can't buy it? The man said he just wanted to see it. He then walked out my front door and back outside. We said our goodbyes and I closed the door. During this meeting, my wife was up in our room. I sat down on the living room couch and turned on my larger wall-mounted TV. My wife then came down and asked me why that guy came into our garden. I was like, what are you talking about? She told me she was upstairs, so I had the window. When the guy left, he walked around our house and into the yard. I stood up, walked to the front window, and looked out. In my field of vision, I could barely see the car on the street. It's always there. I didn't know why this guy was there and I told my wife. Then I walked to the back window and looked at them. At first, I didn't see anything. I asked my wife where he had gone in the garden, and she told me he disappeared behind a bush. I continued to look out the window, then turned on the light. Then I leaned to the side and looked out one of the windows toward the bushes. As soon as I saw the guy crouching and hiding, I could only see part of him. But that's enough. I just opened the window a little and yelled that if he didn't leave right now, I would call the police. A few seconds later, the man stood up and ran away. I walked to the front of the house and looked out the window. My wife and I watched the guy sprint to the car and drive away. Then I took that listing off Craigslist. I also reported the incident. I regret giving this guy my address, and I should have known better. I'm glad my wife saw him go out the back of the house, because who knows what his plan was. A few months ago, one day at work I was bored and didn't have much to do, just using my phone or browsing the internet on my computer. Sometimes I go on Craigslist and look at cars or other things for sale just for fun. So, one day I had about an hour before I had to leave work and I had nothing else to do. I went to Craigslist and saw the section about login errors. I clicked on it just for fun because I thought it might be interesting to read. This is a section on Craigslist where people will post if they've seen someone and maybe talk to them in public or something. If they haven't received the person's name or information, they will contact them and ask them to contact them. This is why we talk about bad connections, and it seems a bit strange to me. I clicked on a few pages and read them as the fourth or maybe fifth I had ever seen. It seems like that person is writing about me. The ad features a blonde woman and then mentions the name of the city where I live and work. When I clicked on the ad, it said I saw you walking down the street last Thursday night and saw you at Target the next day wearing a Braves hat. Let me know if I can stop by sometime. This shocked me because not only did I go for a walk in my neighborhood on Thursday night, but I also hit the Target, and I wore my Braves hat to Target. This makes me a bit suspicious. That person saw me in 2 different places and followed me. That's what went through my mind immediately. But maybe it's just someone who lives in my neighborhood. And that's a coincidence. They certainly described me. I know that for sure. But I decided not to respond to the ad. I finished my work for the day and then went home. I live alone in a small house on a fairly busy street. One of my best friends, Avery, came over after work and we hung out quite a bit after she arrived. I told him about posting on Craigslist. I decided to show him, so I grabbed my laptop and logged in. When I looked at Craigslist's login errors section, I saw that there was now a new post titled Blonde Woman and then mentioned my city. The second part, this article is very recent. It had been done less than an hour before. He said, I saw you leaving work today. I hope you see one of these ads and get back to me. Everyone and I looked at each other in shock. It's very crazy. And that message indicated that whoever it was, they were probably following me. We both ran to all the windows and looked out into the street to see if that guy was somewhere, but we didn't see anything strange. I never noticed him looking at me. However, the parking lot at my work is quite large and has many other cars. It would be easy for someone to do this without getting caught. For the next few days, I was a bit worried. I've checked Craigslist several times, but there are no new posts. I also paid attention to my surroundings, but never noticed anything unusual. It would be difficult unless it was obvious, but I've never been followed or anything like that. But one day, when I got home from work, I was walking from the kitchen to the living room. When I entered the living room, I saw a car parked in front of my house. I walked to the window and looked to see if I recognized him. I didn't, but less than 10 seconds later I saw the car leave. However, I couldn't see the driver. Then the next day, as I was returning home from work, about halfway there, a car pulled up behind me. That was the same car I saw in front of my house. I had a bad feeling, and the car went straight towards the grid. I turned around 3 times in a row. I was afraid she would follow me home. But then, when I turned right in front of my house, the car went in the opposite direction. I was able to return home without seeing the car again. But then I decided to respond to one of the ads. I couldn't take it anymore. At home, I took out my laptop and contacted that person. I asked them why they were following me and asked them to leave me alone. After sending a message, I expected the person to respond and provide an explanation or leave me alone. I waited and continued my day. A few hours later, around 9 p.m., I checked again. No response from that person. I closed my laptop and went into the living room. But that's when I noticed the car in front again. It's still parked in the same place. I walked to the window and looked closer. However, it seemed to me that no one was sitting in the driver's seat. That's when I noticed something in the corner of my right eye. I looked and saw a man in my yard, across the driveway. He was heading towards my front door. I was really scared. I didn't even waste any time. And I ran out the window, took my cell phone and called the police. While I was waiting for the operator to answer the phone, I heard the man trying to get in through my front door. This was followed by an explosion. Then I ran back to my room and closed the door. About 15 minutes later, the police arrived. The unbelievable part is that when they got there, the man was still there. He was in my backyard, and they found him trying to get into a back window. I was glad that I called when I did. I showed the police everything and told them about the things that had happened. It seemed like the man had been stalking me for a while. I guess that when I asked him to leave me alone, he felt that he had to take matters into his own hands. Since this happened, I moved and now have an apartment across town. I also haven't been on Craigslist at all. When I was in college, like most people, I didn't have much money. During the summer, I worked. And in college, I also had a job on campus. But I don't have many hours or much money for that. I don't have time for a normal or even part-time job during my studies. I have a lot of homework. And school was difficult for me, so I will spend more time studying. But in the first year, I wanted to make more money. I decided to go on Craigslist and look for quick jobs I could do. One day I went there and looked at the general work. These would be good jobs for me because I'm a pretty healthy 21-year-old. Any kind of work like gardening or something is what I was hoping for. Not long after, I saw an ad with a simple message: yard cleaning. It's exactly what I was hoping for, and I clicked on it. However, there are not many details. It just said that needing someone to clean my yard would take a few hours and cost $100. The announcement was announced only an hour earlier, and I answered. Soon that person came back to me, and I took the job. They asked me if I could come on Friday night, and I asked for the time. They said 9 p.m. was a bit strange to me. I'm expected to do some yard work during the day. I should have asked them why it was so late, but I didn't. I'm just afraid that if I do that, they will get angry and find someone else, and I want money. Besides, I was free at that time. And it's not like I have class the next morning or anything. I agreed, and they gave me the address. Friday night, I put the address on my phone and went there. I had never been to this area before, and it was almost 20 minutes away. The location is a house with a fairly large yard. It's in a residential area, but I can't say much about the area because it's dark and very dark. There were only a few dim streetlights around. I let the person know I'm there to text them. And then I got out of the car. I arrived about 5 minutes early and started walking home. It's a 2-story house that seems pretty normal to me. There were overgrown bushes in the yard as well as leaves and the like. I walked to the front door and rang the bell. All the lights in the house seemed to be off, which was quite strange. About a minute passed without anyone opening the door. Then I knocked on the door. Maybe their doorbell is broken or something? After knocking on the door, I still didn't hear anything. I waited and then checked my phone to see if I was at the right address. No one responded to my messages. I knocked on the door again. Still, no one came to the door. But then I heard something outside, like footsteps. And they were to my right, almost coming from the side of the house. I looked, but it was very dark. And there was also a tree in my field of vision, so I couldn't see anything. I took a few steps back to look. Although the footsteps were far away, they were clearly in the yard of the house where I was staying. When I backed away, the speed stopped. I called to see if anyone was there. I thought maybe it was the owner. But I didn't get an answer. I started to feel a little scared about this situation. Then I heard footsteps again. I can't anymore, and I started walking. I didn't look behind me, and I walked to my car. I went in and locked the door. I looked toward the yard and didn't see anyone. Then I checked my phone one last time to see if there was a response. Always nothing, and I left. I started walking back to my college apartment. But while I was still walking on this quiet street, I saw a car appear behind me. I don't know exactly where it came from, but it looked like he was coming out of the driveway of the house where I was staying. The car followed me out of that street and onto the next street. When I got back on the highway to go back to campus, the car did the same. He stayed with me while I went shopping, and then I got suspicious. I kept driving, but when I got about a mile from school, the car finally stopped following me. I turned left when I turn. I can turn back. But then I decided not to go on Craigslist anymore. I don't know if the car following me had anything to do with that or not. That's how I feel. But I have no proof. What I do know is that the experience was very strange. That person never contacted me after that, and I still don't know who is walking behind the tree. They must have heard me when I called, but didn't answer. I'm glad I left when I did. The story takes place in the summer of 2021. At that time, I had just bought a new car. Before that, I drove an old 2004 Chevrolet Trailblazer, which, if you don't know, is an SUV. I didn't think it would be worth that much. But I decided to sell it on Craigslist anyway. After all, that's where I bought it years ago, and I take good care of most of them. I took a few photos in the driveway and then listed the car. It works quite well and is very reliable. So I knew someone would be interested. I listed it for $2,000 and waited. I'm really in no rush to sell it, and it took me about 2 days before I received the first response to the ad. The answer is that someone asked if the car is still for sale. I said yes, and they texted back asking if they could take a look. We then arrange a meeting after the person gets off work the next day. I asked for their names, and he said his name was Barry. He said he got off work at 8 p.m. I suggested we meet in the nearby Walmart parking lot, since it's a very large parking lot. It will also be in a public space, because I don't want random people coming to my house. Barry agrees. The next day, I went to Walmart, 5 minutes from my house. I arrived early and looked around the parking lot. I told him I was at rock bottom and he couldn't remember me. The parking lot is always empty in the back half and is often used by truckers or sometimes RVers for overnight parking. The first red flag happened before Barry even showed up. I should have left immediately. He texted me saying he was there and asked me what my car looked like. I was thinking seriously, you're interested in buying the car and you don't even remember what it looks like. I gave him a description. Gray SUV in the back corner. He then replied that he had seen me and was driving. I looked around and saw a much newer car coming towards me. It was a red Ford Focus. That was just a few years ago. He parked right next to me and I saw a man get out. He was younger, maybe around 30, with dark brown hair and dark glasses. I got out of the car and walked towards him. We met in front of my car and shook hands. I gave him some basic information about the car while he looked at it. Less than a minute, he asked me if we could take it for a test drive. I said yes, and Barry sat in my driver's seat, and I sat in the passenger seat. I noticed he had been talking on the phone a lot since he got out of the car. Something seems a bit strange about this guy. When he started driving, I asked him if he knew the area and if he could drive some of the nearby roads. He said he knew that well. And we left Walmart and went to a quieter neighborhood. Barry took a route that I have only taken a few times. It's a fairly quiet road with a speed limit of 35. There are a few patches of forest here and there and a few industrial-looking buildings. While driving, everything went quite calmly. I talked about the car for the first few minutes, but Barry didn't answer me or say anything. I remember one time he looked at his phone while driving, and I told him he shouldn't do that. He said, "Oh, sorry," and then he put it away. I asked him how he thought the car drove, and if he likes it, he'll just say yes. And is it good? After maybe 5 minutes of driving, I started to think we should turn back. That's when Barry suddenly started slowing down. Then he suddenly left the road and stopped in this crappy parking lot. There is some kind of forest on both sides leading to it. The parking lot has lots of potholes and appears to be a warehouse. When he arrived at the parking lot, he walked a few steps and then stopped the car. I noticed there was another car in this parking lot. At first, I thought maybe I just wanted to turn things around, but when he stopped the car, I was really confused. Then I turned off the engine and took the key out of the ignition. He then opened the driver's door and started to get out. I was really confused and looked at him wondering what was going on. As he was walking out, he suddenly yelled at me to get off the bus. I looked to my right and saw 3 men getting out of the other car that was also in the parking lot, and 3 men were walking towards us. They were probably 50 feet away. These men began to walk at a fast pace, and Barry walked out in front of my car and waved me out. I heard him yell at me to get out of the car again. I knew I was in trouble at that point, and I don't know what these people want, but I quickly understood something. My car had 2 keys and I brought a spare key with me in case I sold it that night. It's in my pocket. After Barry saw I refused to get out of the car, he started moving towards my passenger door. I thought he was going to try to force me out. Meanwhile, the remaining 3 men were only about 20 feet away. I reached into my pocket and felt for the door lock button. I pushed him, and when Barry got closer, I got into the driver's seat of the car. He went to the door and tried to open it, but it was locked. At that time, I quickly inserted the spare key into the ignition and started the engine. He still had the other key there, and he would be able to open it if he had it. When the car started, I saw him reach into his pocket and saw the other men start to run away. However, as soon as the car started, I put it in drive mode and pressed the accelerator. The car sped away from everyone and they chased after us on foot a while before, so I didn't run at full speed. Then I quickly turned around. As the men now ran towards their car, I got out of that potholed parking lot as fast as I could, then hit the road again. I took the first turn visible from that road, and those men could not reach me in time with their car. I didn't see them behind me and I was able to escape. I went straight home. When I got home, I called the police and reported everything. I told them about the car at Walmart that Barry had left behind and gave them as much information as I could. I later discovered that the car Barry used to drive to Walmart was still there and had been returned stolen. I don't know if Barry and the others have been found or not. I know I'm really glad I brought a spare key and was able to get rid of them.